Finally, let's look at a piece on service animals and the ADA. We're used to animals helping us at work, but today we're going to talk about service animals and the laws relating to them. There are a few laws that a South Carolina officer needs to be familiar with when dealing with calls involving service animals. We'll start with the Americans with Disabilities Act. The Americans with Disabilities Act says that service animals are dogs and miniature horses. The Act also says that a service animal should be permitted on a premises except where it is out of control or not housebroken. And if the animal is excluded, the individual should have the opportunity to be on the premises without the service animal. The Americans with Disabilities Act says harnessed, tethered, or leashed animals are preferred unless it would interfere with the service animal's safe, effective performance. Then the animal needs to be otherwise under the handler's control, which means voice, signal, or other effective means. Americans with Disabilities Act says that you may not ask about the nature or extent of a disability. However, you may ask if the animal is required because of a disability, or what work or tasks the animal is trained to perform. However, you cannot ask when it's readily apparent, such as a dog guiding a blind person, pulling a wheelchair, or providing stability assistance. Then we have some South Carolina statutes. 47-3-930, interference with the use of a guide dog or service animal. It's unlawful for a person who has received notice that his behavior is interfering with the use of a guide dog or service animal to continue with reckless disregard to interfere with the use of the guide dog or service animal by obstructing, intimidating, or jeopardizing the safety of the guide dog, service animal, or its user. It's unlawful for a person with reckless disregard to allow his dog that is not contained by a fence, a leash, or other containment system to interfere with the use of a guide dog or service animal by obstructing, intimidating, or otherwise jeopardizing the safety of the guide dog, service animal, or its user. 47-3-940, which relates to injury, disability, or death, says that it is unlawful for a person with reckless disregard to injure, disable, or cause the death of a guide dog or service animal. It's unlawful for a person with reckless disregard to allow his dog to injure, disable, or cause the death of a guide dog or service animal. 47-3-950, which is unauthorized control over a guide dog or service animal, provides that it's unlawful for a person to wrongfully obtain or exert unauthorized control over a guide dog or service animal with the intent to deprive the guide dog or service animal user of his guide dog or service animal. And then 47-3-960 makes it unlawful for a person to intentionally injure, disable, or cause the death of a guide dog or service animal, except in the case of self-defense or humane euthanasia. And finally, we have a statute relating to restitution, 47-3-970. A defendant convicted of a violation of this article may be ordered to make full restitution for damages, including incidental and consequential expenses incurred by the guide dog or service animal and its user, which arise out of or are related to the criminal offense. Section 2-7-35, handicapped person defined. Wherever the term handicapped person appears in the laws of the state, unless it is stated to the contrary, it shall mean a person who has a physical or mental impairment which substantially limits one or more major life activities, including, but not limited to, caring for himself, performing manual tasks, walking, seeing, hearing, speaking, breathing, learning, and working, or meets any other definition prescribed by federal law or regulation for use by agencies of state government which serve handicapped persons. Section 43-33-20, right of use of public facilities and accommodations of blind, other special need persons, and guide dog trainers. The blind, the visually handicapped, and the otherwise physically disabled have the same right as able-bodied to the full and free use of the streets, highways, sidewalks, walkways, public facilities, and other public places. The blind, the visually handicapped, the otherwise physically disabled are entitled to full and equal accommodations, advantages, facilities, and privileges of all common carriers, airplanes, motor vehicles, railroad trains, motor buses, streetcars, boats, or any other public conveyance or mode of transportation, hotel, lodging place, places of public accommodation, amusement or resort, and other places to which the general public is invited, subject only to the conditions and limitations established by law and applicable alike to all persons. Every handicapped person has the right to be accompanied by an assistance dog, especially trained for the purpose in any of the places listed above in this section without being required to pay an extra charge for the assistance dog. Each handicapped person is liable for any damage done to the premises or facilities by the dog. Every person who is a trainer of an assistance or guide dog while engaged in the training of an assistance or guide dog has the same rights and privileges with respect to access to public facilities and accommodations as blind and disabled persons, including the right to be accompanied by an assistance or guide dog or an assistance or guide dog in training in any of the places listed above of this section without being required to pay an extra charge for the assistance dog. A person who uses premises or facilities accommodations accompanied by a dog under the authority of this item is liable for any damage done to the premises or facilities by the dog. Section 43-33-40. Unlawful interference with rights of blind or other physically disabled person. It is unlawful for a person or his agent to deny or interfere with admittance to or enjoyment of public facilities enumerated in Section 43-33-20 or interfere with the rights of a totally or partially blind or disabled person under Section 43-33-20. We traveled to North Myrtle Beach to speak with Rick Kaplan, the founder of Canine Angels, a nonprofit that rescues dogs and gives them to injured veterans. We're here talking with Rick Kaplan from Canine Angels. What can you tell us about what your group does?
Well, this is a very special group. You're looking at 11 dogs here, every one of which was originally in a shelter. They're all rescues. Part of Canine Angels' mission is to rescue dogs that are seemingly lost and have no value to society or to anybody. We adopt them, we train them, we turn them into not only obedient dogs, but certified working service dogs, and then we donate them for free to our local disabled veterans.
That is awesome. What sorts of things do you train them to do?
Well, a lot of it depends on each individual dog. If you see the gamut of breeds that we have here, we have mixes, we have purebreds, we have larger, we have smaller. We believe that every dog is an individual, and we extract from the individual whatever it is that individual has to give us. So some dogs end up being service dogs for post-traumatic stress. These are dogs that are sensitive to human vibrations, brain frequencies, skin hormone, perspiration changes, very high detection capabilities. We have in our presence a seizure dog. We have several PTSD dogs that are so sensitive that they can be trained to wake up their veteran out of a nightmare, out of sweat. They're able to sense stress levels, very high stress levels, and literally remove veterans from social situations which are uncomfortable. They're able to know when medicine needs to be taken. They're able to know when somebody needs to be alerted, some other person in the house. Mm-hmm. They're able to go get help in case of an emergency, a blackout, a seizure, a fall, an injury, that sort of thing. And then all of the dogs are trained to do at least several tasks which can help physically disabled veterans, such as veterans that are in Easy Girl, veterans that are in wheelchairs, veterans that are missing limbs, arms, legs, both. They're all trained to pick things up, to carry things, to retrieve things by name, to do tasks around the house, opening and closing doors, windows, pushing buttons to open up doors for handicap and that sort of thing. The limit is, there is no limit. We can teach a dog to do anything, and actually there are two plateaus of training. The first is getting the dog to be a service dog, going through all the obedience and all the task training or PTSD training. The second is when we match the dog with a veteran, the training has to start all over again. First we have to train the veteran And that's, by the way, is the hard part. The human is much harder than the dog. Let's get that down right away. But we now need to tailor what the dog knows for the veteran, the family situation, because there may be another dog, there may be other people in the house, children, elderly people, and the veteran's particular disability, and the setup of the veteran's home. This is a little itchy one because she's brand new. This is Ginger.
Ginger, she's
She's
a puppy,
doing
isn't
great,
she?
yeah.
So when these dogs are placed with a veteran and they're out in public, they might not necessarily be on a leash in public?
Well, what the ADA law says is that dogs should be leashed, except in the case of a situation where being on a leash may endanger the veteran, and that clearly would be a situation if somebody was missing a limb, if somebody had a vertigo or a balance issue. What we don't want is his own or her own service dog causing them an injury. We don't want that. Good girl, sit. Ginger, sit. Good girl. So what we do is we train all our dogs to go without a leash. Many of the times when we place a dog, the dog will then become leashed. For example, the veteran we saw this afternoon, he is very unstable. He uses a cane, and his level of balance is not good. So that dog is trained to actually lean against him when she feels that he's not balanced. She will actually lean against him on either side. So if she were leashed on one side, that might interfere with the ability to do her job.
You mentioned service dogs and therapy dogs. What's the difference?
There is a lot of confusion, but there's a really important difference. A therapy dog is an excellent dog. A therapy dog is a personal, private pet. Has no legal protection of any kind more than any other dog. It's a highly trained dog that's gone through both obedience training and therapy training, which means that you could take your dog to a nursing home, a hospital, an assisted living, a school, and the real definition is that a therapy dog makes somebody else feel better. A service dog is very different. A service dog is a much higher level of obedience and training. A service dog is a dog that mitigates one or more disabilities for one person. A service dog serves you. A therapy dog serves other people. A service dog is protected by federal law under the Americans with Disabilities Act and has the full rights of any American citizen to access to any place in this United States of America that's open to the public.
Great. If you had anything to tell the police officers in South Carolina who might encounter service animals, what advice would you tell them?
I take this advice from Larry McMahon, who is the veteran that we met today, who was a police officer for 15 years. And his experience with his own service dog has opened up his eyes to the other side of the coin, so to speak. And he says that most of the time, if there's a complaint by a business owner, a police officer will show up thinking that the business owner is in the right. It's just the way the human thought leans. In his opinion, he says that what police officers should do is think that at least be balanced about it, or think that perhaps that the service dog owner has some rights here. Because if in fact there is an issue and the team, the dog and the human, are willing to hang around and wait for the police, they may have a very good point. There are laws, there are established laws. Blackjack, sit. Blackjack, sit. Blackjack, sit. There are established laws on the books, but as you well know, a law on the book doesn't mean anything if people aren't aware of it and aren't willing to abide by it. So part of our campaign is not only to train service dogs for disabled veterans, but I believe we already have done this and we're going to continue to, and that is raise the awareness in the whole general public about the rights and obligations of service dog teams, the rights and obligations of the businesses, and what we're really seeking is a society in which a service dog team can go out in public without discrimination, with understanding, with respect, and also the obligation to fulfill their part by having the dog well trained, keeping the dog highly trained, removing the dog if the dog's not having a good day, which happens to all of us, and honoring and respecting not only our veterans who are disabled, but anybody who's disabled that needs a service dog.
One of the clients from Canine Angels, Larry McMahon, spoke with us regarding service animals and had some advice for officers who might respond to calls involving service animals. He said it's important to take a pro-dog stance, to remember the veteran might have difficulty explaining his situation and has already been a stressful encounter with a proprietor. He said, we'd never tell somebody that they can't bring their cane into an establishment, so we should think of service dogs the same way. That wraps up this edition of Legal Update. If you need to download a student handout, you can find them on the internet at www.sccja.sc.gov. Click on the Training tab and then the Studio link. If you have a question, you can email it to us at cjastudio@sccja.sc.gov. That takes care of this edition. Y'all stay safe.